I'd like to welcome you all to Book Passage and thank you for spending your beautiful Sunday afternoon with us here supporting your local independent bookstore. Obviously, it means everything to us so we can have amazing writers and musicians just like today's come and visit us. Today, Book Passage is very excited to bring you Bill Amatneek, celebrated musician and author of Acoustic Stories, Pickin for the Prez and Other Unamplified Tales. His enchanting, hilarious, and poignant book features 21 insider stories from Bill's time playing bass for the likes of Seeger, Peter, Paul and Mary, and Jerry Garcia. The result is a captivating peek at some truly amazing artists and the stories they lived. Please join Book Passage in most warmly welcoming Bill Amatneek.
That was Johanna, the wrangler for this event. Johanna, thank you so very much. Thank you, Janelle, for bringing me in, and all the other people here at Book Passage who have been more than kind. Thank you. And thank you, one and all, old friends, new friends, and people whom I've never met, for coming out today. It's usual at author events such as this for the author to read a story from his or her book. But since I foolishly consider myself a storyteller, I hope you will indulge me if I tell a story to you instead. May 21st, 2006, finds me standing on an outdoor stairway that leads from George Schultz's driveway to George Schultz's backyard patio at his home in Palo Alto. Now, George, you may recall, was Ronald Reagan's Secretary of State and a bona fide American political conservative. I am here this afternoon with two music colleagues, Doug and Russ, to play a cocktail bluegrass gig for 14 people. There's George, his wife Charlotte, and 11 members of Stanford University, 11 faculty members, including Stanford's president. And they are all, I believe, members of the Hoover Institution, sometimes referred to as a right-wing think tank. So that's 11, 12, 13. Oh, how could I forget? Their guest of honor that day, President George W. Bush. Because of Bush's presence, there are something like, in the immediate half-a-block area, 300 armed personnel. Stanford University Police, Palo Alto Police, County Police, State Police. The Army is very well represented. There are some Navy SEALs here. There are a scattering of Marines, and the Air Force is represented by 2 Apache helicopters that circle high overhead. Also here today are about a dozen Secret Service agents, people whose lives are pledged to protecting the president. Indeed, all of these 300 armed personnel are there protecting the life of the president. We're standing on this stairway waiting for the events coordinator to give us the green light to scamper up to the upper patio and the bandstand and start playing music for the 14 guests. I am two steps beneath the upper landing, and on the upper landing is a White House Secret Service agent, blue suit, white shirt, tie, loaded with barely concealed weaponry. And because I'm 2 steps beneath him, I am eyeball even with his tie. And I'm looking at his tie, and I know this tie, I think. Excuse me, officer, but is that a Jerry Garcia tie? His jaw drops, his face pales, and without saying a word, he flips the tie over and shows me the Grateful Dead logo on the back. He leans forward and he says, "No one ever gets that. Does your boss know about this tie?" He doesn't answer. So I figure not only does his boss not know, he doesn't want his boss to know. So I say to him, "Well, are you a fan of Jerry's work?" He says, "Well, kind of, of his early stuff." Oh, well, that's real interesting because the ties are definitely Jerry's later stuff. So it sounds to me like this Secret Service agent is trying to all of a sudden distance himself from the man whose necktie is around his throat. So I say, well, you know, a few years ago I played some music with Jerry. I wrote a story about it. It's in a book of stories. I've got a few copies up in my gig bag at the bandstand. If you like, I'll give you a copy before I leave. Well, before he can answer, the events coordinator gives us the green light. We scamper up the stairs and across the lower patio, up the 4 steps to the upper patio, take our place at the bandstand, get out our instruments, and in honor of the guest of honor, we start playing Texas's unofficial state anthem, The Yellow Rose of Texas. The patio doors swing open. 1, 2, 3 professors exit, and then there he is, the decider of the United States of America. Bush steps out onto the patio. He hears the music, and he looks up at the bandstand, and our eyes lock. He nods to me. Thank you for Yellow Rose of Texas. I nod back. You're welcome, bud. And now he makes a beeline for the bandstand. He holds in his right hand a long neck bottle of something, I guess it's a 0 alcohol beer, wrapped in a white paper napkin. And as he comes our way, he goes like this. And out of nowhere, an anonymous hand darts out and takes that bottle from him. It reminds me that Bush is being watched by many, many people, all of them armed, all of them tasked with protecting his life. Bush scampers up the 4 steps to the upper patio. He's with us in no time at all. Well, thanks for coming out and playing music for us today, guys. I really appreciate it. You're welcome, Mr. President. Welcome to California. I hope you're having a good time. Well, I am. You know, just being here, I got a better attitude already. Well, that's what visiting California is somewhat about, right? A better attitude. And for a moment, I envision him under California's influence, renouncing war and joining the Green Party. Right, it's a very brief moment. Bush shakes hands with Russ, who's playing mandolin. Russ stops playing music. Doug and I keep the music going. Then he goes to shake my hand next. Well, when the bass player stops playing music, the music is over. So, you'll excuse my saying, the Yellow Rose of Texas fades on the bush as I shake hands with the Bush. And now he shakes hands with Doug, and now something totally unexpected happens. He starts walking into the bandstand between Doug and myself. Well, I had heard he was an amateur guitarist. So as he takes these steps, I say, oh, Mr. President, would you like to sit in with the band? No, I want to have my picture taken with you. So, all of this in 2 seconds. Bush starts turning around to face the same direction we are. I start thinking, picture? That's nice. Where's the photographer? At that instant, the White House lead photographer, Eric Draper, bounds up the stairs, camera in hand. He gets in front of the band and he frames the shot. And I can see that the shot's going to be way over there with Bush and the boys in the band, and that I'm likely outside of the frame. My bass is in the way. So I shift the bass from my left hand to my right, step forward with my left foot, which collides with my bass's end pin, pitching me forward. I am going down. Now, all of this in a micro millisecond. I hear the Apache helicopters circling overhead. I see the sharpshooters on the roofs of the homes that surround us. I see the Army personnel who are constantly patrolling the periphery of the grounds, all of them armed. If I go down, I am not only going to splinter my bass, but I'm going to take Bush with me. He's right over here, right in my path. But I also realize that the only way to save myself in this horrific fall is going to be to slap my hand on Bush's shoulder. And this somehow feels wrong. You just don't do that to the President of the United States. And more importantly, this could easily be taken as an aggressive move against the President by the dozens of people who have me in their sights. I don't have time to think. I don't have time to decide. The survival instinct catches on. I slap my hand on the Bush's shoulder and stay down. Waiting for the squawk of a walkie-talkie. Bass player assaulting president. Fire it will, fire it will. But nothing happens. I stand up, overjoyed just to be alive, as Draper clicks off a shot on his camera.
Wow. 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 He didn't go down.
The moment is over. We break our pose. Bush thanks the band again. Mr. President, is there anything special we can play for you? No, you boys are doing great. Just keep on doing what you're doing. And he starts to walk away. He takes 2 steps, and then he turns back to the band and he says, I didn't know they had bluegrass in California. We've had bluegrass in California since 1950. Is he kidding? He seems serious. Finally, I say, of course we do, Mr. President. No, you boys must be from Kentucky. Well, bluegrass was born in Kentucky. So if you're a Republican, you're probably thinking, oh, the president is paying the band a compliment. And if you're a Democrat, you're probably thinking, oh, he is out of touch, isn't he? Bush rejoins his dinner companions. We play for another 25 minutes. And then we get the word from Charlotte Schultz that her guests are going to head up the 4 steps to the upper patio, around the side of the pool, and into the pool house for supper, and that we are to lead them. I had heard that this was going to be a strolling gig, but I had tried to block it out of my mind. A strolling gig is one where you're playing music and walking at the same time. Well, this is a near impossibility for a string bass player, unless, like the bass players in Philadelphia's Mummer Parade, you duct tape the instrument to your body, something I was not about to do with my 135-year-old Czechoslovakian string bass. So, I pick up the bass, hook it behind my neck, and start strolling. Since my left hand is dedicated to carrying the bass's weight, I can only play open strings. Well, the tune doesn't call for all open strings, so it must have been a corn-pone sound and a Three Stooges sight as I waddle down the path. I look over my shoulder, and the president is 2 steps behind me. He sees my predicament and he says, why, walking and carrying the bass like that? You must have good upper body strength. I have no upper body strength. For the second time this afternoon, the president has me at a loss for words. The best I can muster is, well, Mr. President, I guess doing the stroll is part of my job today. I see a clear piece of patio off to the side where we can safely pull over and continue playing while the group walks by us into the pool house. But no, the President of the United States stops to listen to us. So all 14 of them stop to listen to us sing and play. My old hen's a good old hen. She lays eggs for the railroad men. Sometimes 1 and sometimes 2. Sometimes enough for the whole darn crew. Cluck old hen, cluck and sing. Cluck old hen, rooster's all gone. Cluck old hen, cluck and squaw. Ain't laid an egg since late last fall. They stand there smiling, tapping their toes, bobbing their heads to the magic of music. And then they do walk by us and disappear into the pool house. It's the last I see of the president. 5 minutes later, we get the word from Charlotte Schultz that supper has begun and our gig is over. We walk back to the bandstand, pack up our instruments. I've got my books with me in my gig bag, so as we're about to exit the grounds, I turn around to find the Secret Service agent in the Jerry Garcia necktie, and oh, there he is. He's 30 feet away from me, guarding entrance to the pool house. And now our eyes lock. And his face is a rictus of white terror. Oh, what's this about? I drop my eyes down to his tie. Get this. He has taken off the Jerry Garcia necktie and swapped it out for a plain old blue polka dot number. Definitely not a Jerry Garcia creation. He did not want to risk my confronting him and outing him as a deadhead in front of his colleagues, or what would be worse, in front of his boss. So, Jerry, if you're up there listening, I just want to assure you of one thing. He will never wear that tie of yours on the job again. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. We're now at the portion where I take questions and hopefully give answers. So any questions about this story or about the book, I'd be happy to entertain them. Yes.
Were you concerned about that photograph hitting the media?
No. The only concern is that, and my wife shares this concern, is that I'm smiling so broadly. And unless you know why I'm smiling, you might think I'm happy to be there. Really, I'm just happy to be alive at that instant, you know. So it has been posted on the web, but I don't think it's gone viral yet. I'm hoping.
I had an incident with President Nixon at the White House back when he was not in favor.
Yes.
And I was standing behind him, and the photograph went all over the country, and boy, did I lose friends.
Yeah. You know, when we were originally offered this gig, we had to think about it, you know, think about the ethics of entertaining a president with whose policies we were very much in disagreement. And, you know, part of me, I wanted to turn that gig down. That would show Bush, you know. But part of me wanted to take it. I knew it would be a gig the likes of which I'd never see again. I also knew that if I was lucky, I'd get to look the president in the eye, take the measure of the man, and maybe one day have a story to tell at Book Passage. So that night, before I had made up my mind, I called an old friend of mine, a lifelong Democrat, and yet he's held the government's highest security clearance, and I asked his advice. He said, Bill, I think you should take the gig, but I'm going to warn you, some of your friends are going to resent it. And indeed, a couple of friends did resent it. You know, why the heck did you take that gig, and having taken it, why didn't you unfurl a banner, you know, when Bush showed up? Well, it's just not my style to have done that. And I wonder whether the person who suggested that would have had the nerve to have done that. So, hasn't gone viral yet, Chuck, yes.
So you've played with everybody from Peter, Paul and Mary, Stefan Grappelli, wonderful Pete Seeger, Jerry Garcia. It just goes on and on. How, you know, your book involves all these different people and stories about each one.
Yeah.
Can you say that you had an extraordinary, fantabulous event with one of them in particular?
That's a great question. Certainly this gig was memorable. You know, some of the things that were interesting is in my youth, we lived in Greenwich Village. This is the mid-40s. And my father was a test engineer for Consumer Reports. So we had tape recorders in our house very, very early, including televisions and color televisions. And village musicians would come over to our house to sing and play so that Dad could record them and they could hear themselves played back. So one of the people who were there frequently was Pete Seeger and the Weavers, and also Paul Robeson. I remember Paul Robeson singing in my house many times while my mother played along on piano. So that was, although a long, long time ago, a very nice memory. Since I've become a storyteller, I noticed this. I go into a gig or just into meeting people going, turn on record. This might be interesting, you know. So more events are memorable. The Bush gig, I knew in advance this was going to be interesting. And as soon as we got back in the van to go home, I took out a pad of paper and wrote down everything he said, everything I could remember, and based the story on that, you know. So anything really outstanding? Gee, there have been so many outstanding things. I feel very fortunate to have played with so many people who were very famous and to have met or just hung out with many people. I'm not sure that maybe something will come to me later. Pete Seeger, certainly high point of my life to be a friend of Pete Seeger. I was corresponding with him until 3 months before he died. And a big loss, big loss. Interestingly enough, I was just flying home from the Folk Alliance convention, which was in Kansas City, Missouri. And I get on the plane and all the aisle seats are taken. I need legroom, so I take a bulkhead seat in between two people. I shake and howdy with the woman on my right, and then I turn to the guy on my left and I say, were you at the Folk Alliance convention? He says, yes, I was. I says, what were you doing there? He says, I was giving a talk with slides and video. And now I'm looking at him for the first time in the face, and he's this close to me, and I said, oh, you are ex-Vice President Al Gore, aren't you?
There he is, right there.
Yeah, and there he is right there. So I told him a Pete Seeger story. More questions?
Oh, I was just going to say the story about the picture. I don't know if you know this, but I actually used that picture to blackmail the other guys in the band.
I see.
One time. I just as a joke. But I went up and said, I want you to play New York, and Feelings, you know, this key, I'm going to sing it, and they just kind of looked at me. And I said, and if you don't like it, I'm going to show everybody this. It took them a while to get it, but then
They got it.
out.
Yeah. Yes.
Do you have a Peter, Paul, and Mary story?
Yes. Oh, well, the story is very interesting. Let's see if I can condense it into 3 minutes. I was the bass player for the Bread and Roses Festival of Music back in the early 80s. And they called me up one day and said that Peter, Paul, and Mary are going to be playing the festival, and they want you to accompany them. And they overnighted me the set list, and I studied all the tunes. And you know, when Peter, Paul, and Mary hit big, I was like 17 years old, and I had a big crush on Mary, like many guys of my music interest. You know, she was beautiful. So the afternoon of the rehearsal finally arrives, and the three of them, they walk in, and there's Mary, you know, more beautiful in person than you could imagine. And she introduces herself to me and gives me a hug. Whoa. And so the next day we go out and play the show. And of course, things happen in a show that don't happen in a rehearsal. And what happened was that 3/4 of the way through the show, Peter stepped to the center mic to sing a song essentially alone, and Mary sauntered back to where I was playing string bass. And she came up on my right side and she put her hand on my shoulder, and then she rested her head on my arm. And then she looked up at me real slowly. And I looked down at Mary, and our eyes locked, and it hit me. Mary loves me. Oh, it's okay. My feelings aren't hurt. I knew Mary loved me, you know. So I don't know how I finished the tune or the rest of the show. 3 tunes later, they leave immediately on a jet plane, no less. I don't even get to say goodbye to Mary. Finally, about a year and a half later, I read in the paper that they're going to be playing the Circle Star Theater. So I buy a ticket and I wait for the evening of the show and I go out to the Circle Star and I knock on the stage door, and who opens the door but Mary? And she gives me a big hug and a kiss. Yes. But they're about to go on stage. So I say, okay, babe, I'll see you after the show. And I rushed to the back of the show. And it was, like all Peter, Paul, and Mary shows, magical. They had the audience in their hands, singing from grandchildren to grandparents through the entire show. But I do remember that about 3/4 of the way through the show, Peter steps to the center mic to sing the same 2 verses to that ballad. And Mary saunters back to where their regular bass player, Richard Kniss, was playing bass. And she comes up on his right side, and she puts her hand on his shoulder. And then she rests her head on his arm. And then she looks up at him real slowly, and he looks down at her. And that's when it hit me that Mary didn't love me. She looked at all her bass players. Ladies, Mary was using me as a prop in her act. So everyone misses Mary. To their credit, Peter and Paul soldier on as a duo, calling themselves Peter and Noel Paul. I'd love to see them, but it seems one of the 2 of them doesn't like to tour, so they're mostly just play the East Coast.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you. It was an honor to play with Peter, Paul, and Mary. I think there have only been 3 bass players who have ever played with them, and I'm one of them. So it was a wonderful experience. It was a really great experience.
Are you still playing and getting material for writing, or?
Well, bumping into Gore the other day gave me...
Oh, that was just recently.
Yeah, that was 2 weeks ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm playing a little less, turning a page in my life now, going from a bass player to being a storyteller. So I'm booking myself, or trying to book myself, into everything from house concerts to bigger venues across the country, telling stories and selling the book, which I enjoy very much. And I don't have to schlep the bass around. I borrow a bass wherever I go, so that's really nice, just to walk into a gig, like a singer, not having to carry anything.
Did you ever play in Sebastopol?
I'm playing a little bit less. I only play with one group that ever plays out. Mostly these are people who play parties. Once in a while I do a tour with a guy whose name is Roland White, a well-known bluegrass musician. And once in a while we play Rancho Nicasio. Everyone knows Rancho, a great venue. But again, playing a little less, telling stories more, which is just fine.
Well, is that your bass, this particular one?
Yes.
Yeah, is this the Czech? Was
This is the
Latvian one?
135-year-old Czech.
Wow, wonderful, thank you.
I've owned it since I was 17 years old. I paid $100 for it. People said, "Oh, you were rooked. Oh man, you were rooked." And recently it's been appraised at like $30,000. So
Wow.
I wasn't rooked that bad. Sometimes musicians ask me, "Oh, did the Bush gig pay great?" Well, the Bushes are no fools. They have lots of parties, or used to, and hire lots of people. And moreover, they went through a music agent, and they all know what the gig pays. So it paid well, it was a good paying gig, but not great. The other question musicians ask me, "Oh, did they feed you?" Well, whenever you play a gig like this, when other people are eating, it's in the contract that you get fed too. And I have no idea whether it was in the contract, but we did not get fed. Who cares? Who cares? It didn't matter. Clearly our getting fed was the least important thing that was happening there that afternoon.
Charlotte Schultz is in charge.
Say again?
Charlotte Schultz is in charge.
Charlotte is very much in
Yeah.
charge. She is, Charlotte, George's husband, is allegedly of more democratic leanings, and she takes very good care of us. She always says before we leave, "Did they feed you? Did we take care of you okay?" And that's very nice. We're just hirelings. She doesn't have to be concerned about us, but she is. She's a very sweet person.
You must know my children on a first-name basis. I think they've been to every dead concert that there is.
Ah.
Yeah.
I played with Jerry Garcia only once, and it was just at David Grisman's home. So I don't really know dead people. But a very,
But you see them.
but a very, very interesting thing happened. The last time I saw Jerry was in San Francisco at Davies Symphony Hall, backstage in the green room, following a concert by the renowned maestro of jazz violin, Stefan Grappelli. So Stefan's in the back, in the green room. He's receiving congratulators. I had already gone through the line and thanked him for an ethereal concert. At this moment, he's sitting next to and talking with none other than Isaac Stern, when in walks David Grisman and Jerry Garcia. Now, David at this point had known Stefan for a number of years, but Jerry had never met him. So he brings Jerry Garcia over to Stefan Grappelli and introduces these two music giants by saying, "Well, Stefan, I'd like you to meet an old friend of mine. This is Jerry Garcia." Well, Stefan, he reaches up, and he shakes Jerry's hand. "Pleased to meet you." But you can tell by the look on his face that Stefan has no idea who Jerry Garcia is. Well, David sees the look on his face, so he continues, "Stefan, Jerry is the leader of the rock group, the Grateful Dead." "Ah, mais oui, certainement, the Grateful Dead. Oh, very pleased to meet you. Enchanté." No. He has no idea who the Grateful Dead is either. But Stefan is no dummy. And he realizes he's being introduced to someone important and that he should say something. So Stefan, who was, I believe, 84 years old at the time, he looks up at Jerry Garcia and he says, "Myself, I am just grateful to be alive." Well, if there are no more questions, then I think we're going to move on to the book signing portion of this evening. The book is a limited edition of 1,000 copies, each one of which has been hand numbered and hand signed on the colophon, which is the last page of the book. I would be happy to sign or inscribe the front page of the book for you as well. I'm trying to keep track of the name and email address of everyone who buys the book and the book number that they buy. So my wife will be collecting that information if you would care to give it to her. And once again, thank you all for showing up. Janelle, thank you for having me here. Nice seeing you all. Thank you.